If you had told me just a few years ago that in 2026 RAM was going to be the sticking point for new builds and that Noctua was going to release a liquid cooler, I would have said, hey man, you need a system reboot. Yet, here we are. Welcome to Machines More. If you're new here, I'm a PC enthusiast and a content creator. I cover PC builds and PC components, and I'm always happy to share about different ways to make your PC build and build experience better. And I'd be really grateful if you go ahead and click that like, subscribe, and bell button so that you can stay up to date on all of the new videos that I post up here. Big thanks. All right, so I covered this one at Computex. Big thanks to Noctua for sending the coolers by so quickly. The video is not paid for by them. Lots to talk about today. I am back, albeit fighting some jet lag. It's always kind of wild when your body tells you, hey guy, you should be awake now. But you look at your watch and it's like, it's still only noon, right? So Noctua's NL-LC1 is the Austrian cooling company's first foray into the world of all-in-one liquid cooling. For the all-in-one portion of the cooler, namely the pump, the cold plate, the tubing, the radiator, Noctua worked with Asetek on this. Asetek is a Danish AIO company that OEMs many AIOs on the market. The NL-LC1 is based on Asetek's flagship EMA V2 platform, which other companies such as Asus and Tri-X have utilized in their units. To this Asetek unit, which features a 30mm thick radiator, Noctua adds their best fans. These are the SX2 PP set of A12x25 G2s for their 240 and 360 versions, and A14x25 G2s in their 420 versions in tan and brown. Now, the fans are going to be the most significant performance factor for this AIOs and most AIOs. They've developed and added a noise management system, though, called the NL-PNA1, which consists of a multi-layer foam pad and cover, and this is added at their factory in Taiwan after they received the units from Asetek. This pump block does have a substantial amount of height because of the added noise treatment now. And though this probably won't present any restrictions for the vast majority of users, it is something that small form factor users may want to keep in mind, as in that context, there often are conflicts that arise with this much height over the CPU. You can remove the cover and foam pad to reduce the height by taking off the torque screws that hold down the cover. If you're going for this unit though, that is a good part of the embed value. So while it would work to run it that way, you're just not going to get any of the acoustic optimizations that Noctua has worked so hard on. So I don't see why it would make any sense to pay the premium for a unit like this just to remove all those goodies. And let's be real, right? You want to fit the owl on this unit, right? That's the whole reason you're getting this, right? So the foam does block some noise, but it also changes the frequency to a lower tone so that it is less noticeable. The other thing is the pump has a limiter switch by the flexible elbows right in the middle here, and this toggles the RPM curve for the unit. Out of the box, Noctua sets it to the quiet mode, which means that with your board's PWM percentage set at 100%, the pump will run at 2100 RPM, and when the coolant temperature rises above roughly 50 degrees, the pump is going to start ramping itself up towards the full speed of 3400 RPM, which you can also set a PWM curve to which the pump will respond accordingly. At the slowest speed of 750 RPM, which corresponds to 20% PWM on your board, the pump will start ratcheting itself up when the coolant hits 45 degrees. Now, we'll note that even with hot CPUs in average ambient conditions, as long as your fan speeds aren't set abnormally low, it's not very common for coolant temps to hit 45 or 50 degrees just with a CPU on the loop. So you may never see that behavior occur. Now, you can also set it to the balanced mode, which at 100% PWM allows the pump to start ratcheting above 2600 RPM at 30 degrees coolant temp towards a max of 3400 RPM and 30 degrees. That's going to actually be a very common coolant temp when your CPU hits a moderate load. So when you set it up this way, I would expect more variability in your pump's RPM. PWM control will work to proportionally bring down the speed relative to what it would otherwise be at 100% PWM in the pump's internal curve. Now, in this mode, you still have the same built-in safety trigger as the quiet mode. And finally, there's a manual mode that just allows PWM control relative to the max of 3,400 RPM, with minimum possible speed still being governed by the internal safety, which kicks in at 45 degrees on the coolant. For the comparative performance testing, I kept the unit in the quiet mode, and I can see why they set it at the 2,100 RPM as the threshold, because above this level, that's when I could start hearing the pump's acoustic impact when the cooler fans were at moderate levels, with 3,400 RPM being unacceptably loud, as I could clearly hear the noise contribution even at 100% cooler fan speeds. For those that are noise sensitive and otherwise wanting a little bit more speed than 2,100 RPM, it could make sense to set a manual curve where the pump RPM is below this level and only allowing the pump to start ramping up, starting at a CPU temp where it would be accompanied by higher cooler fan levels, as that would to some extent mask the noise of the pump. But I will cover the noise and the thermal impact of the pump speed shortly to help you make that decision. Before we get to performance testing, I will talk quickly about mounting. So this one does not mount like how you see most companies implementing Asetek units. You might have had an Asetek unit, it does not mount like that. Instead of a stock Asetek mounting solution, this actually uses Noctua's mounting hardware in their SecuFirm 2 Plus that they also use for their heatsink based coolers. And this allows for offset mounting options with Intel-LGA 1851 and AM5. The idea being, shifting the center of the cold plate here to line up with the hotspot on the CPU. And this will typically yield a small boost to temps for CPUs on either socket. And while it is an easy optimization, it's actually not commonly utilized by companies that are offering AIOs now. The units will be compatible with AMD AM4 and AM5, and on the Intel side, only LGA 1700 or 1851. So if you have an older Intel 115X or 1200 socket, this will not work. The unit secures to the bars at 2 points. A Torx driver is required for all fasteners, which they do provide. One thing I did notice was the pump cable actually exits right where one of the fastening screws is located. So it's a little bit of an odd design choice because this can become a small nuisance. Just make sure you don't pinch the cable with your driver. At Computex, they showed this unit that would work best with the elbows in the south position. You can rotate the bars to elbows east on Intel mounts. My testing on LGA 1851 confirmed that the south facing is better, and you can't do this on AM5 because the included hardware simply does not allow you to do that orientation. You have to either do this way or this way, and this just makes more sense. In general, I would stick the tube south, even with my test board, which is the Asus Z890-I, which has a muscular M.2 heatsink below the socket. I could still fit this unit in the south-facing orientation, and although it looks kind of chunky because of the top cover and all, the footprint is actually not particularly obnoxious. The fans come with a radiator gasket that's installed on the exhaust side. You can choose however you want to orient them. The optimal setup is going to depend on your case and the placement and your desired outcome. So if you flipped into intake, which is what I did, you would just flip the gasket to the other side, just making sure that is always the side touching the radiator. And separately, if you have the clearance and you're having board cooling concerns, Noctua does offer this magnetic fan in the NL-LC1, which will retail for $20 or €20. This auxiliary fan will aid in some airflow directly around the board. However, in a scenario like my test condition, which was a side-mounted intaking rad where the airflow is already going directly at the board, it actually will not add anything meaningful because you already have that airflow there. On to the performance testing. So this one's a little bit different. To find a suitable and meaningful comparison point, I didn't want to just throw up results from various AIOs and say, hey, look, this unit beats them. because it will. It's equipped with the best 120 millimeter or 140 millimeter fans that you can get. No other unit on the market is going to come bundled with these fans, and the fans are going to be the most important performance contributor for AIO performance, assuming that your pump block isn't a piece of junk. But on the other hand, that may not matter because you can just go and get these fans and install them on any rad you want. You could install them on your current AIO if you have one already. You could install them on another AIO that you're looking at on the market. And you know, if your region will get this Noctua cooler, more than likely you can already just go and get these fans. And I'll have the review linked up here if you're curious about that. But this unit is what I would consider an expensive AIO, with the 240 that's retailing at €220 or US dollars, and the 360 at $250, but it's strictly performance oriented, and that is all you're paying for. So it wouldn't be meaningful to compare it to a similarly priced unit that features a fancy LCD screen or what have you. For most units above the $200 mark, that's what you're getting. And so I wanted to compare it to a reasonable best alternative that I could come up with. So it's funny because I realize now that I've done this in 2 of my recent videos. But prior to this AIO's existence, that's what I would recommend. Just upgrade the fans if you want to maximize performance. It's a very easy upgrade. So I went to one of my favorite performance-oriented no-nonsense units in the Cooler Master Atmos Stealth. We saw the V2 at Computex. This one features a low-profile quality pump and block, a slightly slimmer 27mm radiator, but overall already good out-of-the-box performance with the stock fans, which even comes close to a 38mm thick radiator equipped unit like the Arctic Freezer 3 Pro. After you add in a set of A12x25 G2 SX2 PPs, it's going to be the best in class. And I know this may be a big factor for some. If you do it this way, you can get the Chromax version of the fans, right? And the thing is, even after you do that, you're still not at the cost of the NL-LC1. 240 this way will land somewhere around 175 US, and you will still have a set of good fans left over that you can sell, trade, or use as case fans, right? So that's why I wanted to compare against this setup. Basically, I don't think the fair comparison for this cooler is going to be your typical off-the-shelf AIO. It's going to be something that you customize. So to do the testing, I used the same exact fans for both units in 240, locked to the same RPM, tested with an Intel 285K running at 232 watts package power. To match the noise from the default quiet mode on the Noctua, I dialed the Atmos pump down to 90%. That's a very quiet pump, even at 100%, nowhere as loud as the Noctua is at the full 3400 RPM. For this testing, the Noctua was installed with the Intel offset that Noctua recommends for 20 or 24 core 1851 CPUs, and the Atmos doesn't have an offset, so we can't do that. But does the Noctua blow the unit out of the water? Well, at 80% fans, the Noctua is only a bit better. It's just over a degree here, and at 100% fans, still a little bit better, still around a degree or so to the good. So with the offset, the mounting system optimizations, I guess it's useful to know that even when the fans are not a factor, you can in fact squeeze out a tiny bit more performance with this Noctua cooler. Now, if you're curious how much of that advantage is from the offset mount, go ahead and consider this. Testing out the offset in a standard mounting position, the performance would be functionally identical to the Atmos. The deficit is within the ballpark of what Noctua's internal testing was when they tested with a 270K plus, and I think the advantage here really appears to come from the optimized mount. And I don't know if Cooler Masters considered that on their V2, which I saw at Computex, but yeah, I think that could be worth a degree or so in this type of scenario. Now, as you will see, or rather hear, when you get to the noise samples, the pump at 3,400 RPM is significantly louder than the max for the quiet mode, which tops out at 2,100 RPM. And if this were my personal system, I would not want the system to hit that regularly, since it is very audible. And quick note is that regardless of what mode you set at startup, the pump will always run at full speed for about 50 seconds in order to flush out bubbles from the pump. So don't be surprised if you get a louder noise at the beginning. But running at 3,400 RPM is an advantage. It's not without gain. the increased noise comes with a 2.4 degree advantage here. So even if you don't use it regularly, consider this like, an ace up your sleeve. Just something that you can dial a custom pump curve for, and just realize I absolutely do not recommend running this RPM level when the fans are low to moderate, because it's extremely noticeable. And finally, just to validate if the pump orientation is indeed the best, in my testing, the south-facing elbows yielded about 1 degree to the good versus the east-facing elbows. And like I mentioned, I would just stick to that unless you absolutely cannot do it for some reason on your board. So with all those optimizations, when you put them all together, this is a very potent unit, the best when you can pull out all the stops. And at a more reasonable real-world operating set of pump RPMs, it actually does not seem to beat a very good AIO that's running the same fans, unless you can benefit from offset mounting. For reference, here's the noise testing. This is with the mic that's mounted directly inside the case, and it is boosted up quite a bit so that you can hear the intricacies of the sound. Realistically, at a quiet mode, I don't think most users will be able to hear it outside the case, and that's how I would personally run it. Just let it top out at 2100. All right, so let's get down to brass tacks. Based on my testing, you cannot argue with the performance. If you get this, you will be very satisfied with this. Noctua has done a bang-up job making sure that no performance is left on the table. Packaging, user experience, the ease of installation, 6-year warranty in general, I was extremely impressed here. And even though at this point I can't tell you anything about durability, having only tested it for a short while, Asetek units also have a decent track record from a safety perspective. You don't hear about leaking issues much with their units. The only thing standing in the way of a, no reservations recommendation here is the value proposition, because I feel like knowing that you can set up a unit like I showed, Chromax or not, absolutely your choice, right? Have money and extra fans left over and still be so close in performance to the Noctua unit. I think there's two ways you can look at the efficacy of the extra cash outlay, right? If you are chasing every degree and you want to be confident that you got the best, sure, do it. I think you will be getting the best, and you get a little Noctua flair on the pump cover here, higher performance ceiling because you have those max pump speeds as well. But at the same time, for many users, I think you'll be very comfortable just doing a Noctua G2 fan upgrade with another AIO that you may have already, or that another AIO that you prefer. And that is still going to be a very cost-effective and very easy way to get close enough, or actually, equal performance for most real-world use cases. So I hope that information was helpful. I put a lot of work into my reviews, so if it was, please like, subscribe, and all that jazz. I will have the AIOs linked down below, so please use those links if you're purchasing to support the channel. Big thanks for watching here, and I'll see you in the next one.